Once seen as a rising star in hip-hop, Cash Out's story has taken a dark and devastating turn. The rapper was just sentenced to a staggering 70 years in prison, 20 years for violating Georgia's RICO Act and life in confinement on a separate, far more serious charge. To make matters worse, recent footage from inside the prison has surfaced, showing a man who looks nothing like the confident artist fans once knew, sparking fears that he may not survive even a year behind bars. Once praised for his potential, Cash Out is now at the center of a disturbing downfall, facing charges that include racketeering, aggravated sodomy, and unlawful restraint crimes that paint a chilling picture of violence and control. His trial stripped away the fame and exposed the criminal ties that had been lurking beneath the surface. Now, with his future locked behind bars, his story serves as a tragic reminder of how quickly success can collapse when the streets come calling. Cash Out stood accused of masterminding a disturbing human trafficking ring that reportedly targeted and exploited multiple women throughout Atlanta. On June 2, 2025, the moment of reckoning arrived as he appeared in Fulton County Superior Court, facing Judge Melanie Lethbridge. What followed was a gripping 7-week trial that pulled back the curtain on an operation far more elaborate than anyone had anticipated. With the public closely watching, prosecutors laid out a chilling case, revealing layers of organized criminal activity that portrayed Cash Out not just as a rapper, but as the leader of a highly calculated and deeply troubling underground network. The prosecution came into Fulton County Superior Court, fully prepared. Led by Deputy District Attorney Ernal Winfriand, they made it clear from the start that they were not there to play games. Armed with what they called a rock-solid case, they unleashed a wave of evidence that left little room for the defense to maneuver. Their presentation was massive and multi-layered, including text messages from 8 different phones, recorded jail calls, financial records, surveillance footage, phone logs, and the most powerful piece of all, emotional, first-hand testimonies from the victims themselves. Investigators had clearly been tracking this operation from every possible angle, and the evidence they compiled left no doubt that this was a deeply calculated system of exploitation. One of the most shocking testimonies came from Cash Out's former girlfriend, who claimed he coerced her into performing acts with other men for money while they were still in a relationship. Her story and others like it delivered an emotional blow in court. One woman tearfully recalled that she was only given food if she agreed to engage in commercial activity, exposing what prosecutors described as psychological warfare that used survival itself as leverage. This was not street-level hustling, it was, as prosecutors argued, a well-organized and deeply manipulative operation. One survivor, through tears, declared that while her body had healed, the trauma left behind would never fade. "The day they committed those acts against me," she said, "they handed me a life sentence." Prosecutor Winfrey made it crystal clear this was not just a case of a rapper gone rogue. This was about a structured, long-running criminal enterprise that had inflicted serious harm for over 7 years. The state described it not as simple pimping, but human trafficking at its core, focused on systemic abuse rather than isolated wrongdoing. Meanwhile, Cash Out's defense, led by attorney Curtin R. Matthews, tried to fight back by attacking the credibility of witnesses and questioning the interpretation of the evidence. Matthews argued that the prosecution exaggerated the scope of the alleged enterprise and pointed to inconsistencies in victim statements, some of whom had even reconnected with Cash Out voluntarily. He also accused the state of overcharging, citing overlapping counts and the reliance on co-defendants who had accepted plea deals in exchange for testimony. Still, by July 18, 2025, after 7 intense weeks in court, the jury delivered its decision and it was damning. Cash Out was found guilty of multiple major offenses, including aggravated sodomy, human trafficking, RICO violations, pimping, pandering, maintaining a place of prostitution, battery, firearms, possession, during a felony, obstruction, and contraband possession. He was acquitted of a few charges like 1 count of aggravated assault, 1 trafficking charge, and 1 relating to maintaining a place of prostitution, which showed that the jury had examined every charge carefully, not just rubber stamping. The state's case, his co-defendants, Linda Smith and Tyrone Taylor, were also hit with serious convictions. One juror later revealed that the panel combed through all 46 counts in the indictment methodically, weighing the facts and concluding that the mountain of evidence was simply too convincing. Then, just 3 days later, on July 21, Judge Melanie Lethbridge issued the sentence that sealed Cash Out's fate, ending his freedom for good. The sentence handed down by Judge Melanie Leftridge was more than just punishment. It was a powerful statement about accountability, especially for those who allegedly abuse their influence to harm others. Throughout this trial, she said, the court has been presented with evidence showcasing some of the most appalling treatment of human beings by other human beings. Her words echoed the seriousness of the case as she confirmed that the state had convincingly proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt. Cash Out, born John Michael Hakeem Gibson, received a life sentence for one of the most severe charges, plus an additional 70 years for RICO and related convictions, all to be served concurrently. The judge made it clear, this was the end of the road. Mr. Gibson, please stand, she said before reading the sentencing aloud. 20 years for the Georgia RICO Act to run consecutively with life on count 10, another life term for aggravated sodomy, and additional years for the various other charges. His co-defendants also faced harsh sentences. Linda Smith was handed 30 years, 24 RICO and 10 for trafficking, to be served back-to-back. Tyrone Taylor received the most devastating sentence after Cash Out, life plus 70 years. Taylor's counts included 20 years for each of 2 trafficking charges, served consecutively, along with 12 months for battery and 5 years for possession of a firearm during a felony. On top of these lengthy sentences, the judge imposed strict lifelong restrictions. All defendants were required to register as sex offenders, maintain no contact with victims or their families, and were banned from visiting specific locations in Atlanta, including 737 Alfred Road and the infamous Fulton Industrial Boulevard. But even after the verdict, Cash Out refused to accept responsibility. During his final statement, he thanked the judge and jurors for their time, acknowledging how difficult their role was, yet insisted they had made the wrong decision. Comparing himself to biblical figures, he said he felt like he was being falsely accused, just as Jesus and other prophets were. I am not perfect, he said, but I know I did not commit these crimes. He went on to express selective remorse not for wrongdoing, but for the people caught in the process, arguing that those who testified against him had been manipulated. Cash Out claimed he was being targeted because of his success, suggesting that co-defendants and witnesses were coerced or intimidated into making him the scapegoat. His tone was defiant, casting himself as the victim of a system determined to bring down someone in a position of power. Even as his fate was sealed, Cash Out continued to deny all allegations, claiming he had never forced any woman into anything, and insisting he was being wrongly targeted. He pointed to his global travels from Atlanta to Dubai as proof, saying no woman had ever accused him of coercion. But what stirred the most backlash in the courtroom was his attempt to compare his situation to biblical figures, specifically Jesus. With his head held high, he claimed he drew strength from his faith, saying, Jesus was falsely accused, and so were many prophets. One day, the truth will come out. He went so far as to suggest that testifying under oath was like claiming to be perfect, like you're Jesus, a remark that left many in disbelief. While he framed himself as a victim of betrayal and false narratives, his mother, Linda Smith, took a completely different tone during sentencing. Tearfully, she expressed deep remorse for the pain caused and shared how she found faith while incarcerated. She spoke of praying sincerely for the victims and feeling called by God to give testimony to help others avoid her mistakes. Judge Melanie Leftridge, however, was unmoved by Cash Out's self-pity and religious comparisons. She stated plainly that the evidence revealed the worst of human behavior, and her sentence reflected the gravity of what had been proven in court. This trial also carried significant weight in the broader context of hip-hop culture, especially in Georgia. It marked the third major RICO case against Atlanta rappers in recent years, following indictments against Young Thug and YFN Lucian showed how Fannie Willis has been using RICO statutes aggressively to dismantle what she describes as criminal networks masquerading as music businesses. With a sentence of life plus 70 years, Cash Out now joins the ranks of the most heavily punished rappers in history. No parole, no early release, and virtually no legal exit route. Though his attorney mentioned a possible appeal, most legal experts agree that overturning the conviction would be nearly impossible given the mountain of evidence, including text messages, financial trails, and deeply emotional victim testimonies. Ironically, the fall of Cash Out began with what seemed like a minor arrest during a prostitution sting in Gwinnett County back in 2019. That one moment unraveled a much larger web, revealing an operation that prosecutors said stretched back to 2013. Around the same time Cash Out was gaining traction in the music scene, the timing stunned many. While fans thought he was rising in the rap game, Authorities believe he was secretly building a dark empire. Shockingly, what should have been a legitimate music label, Pyres Music Group, LLC, was allegedly transformed into a front for exploitation. Instead of searching for talent to promote, the group was reportedly targeting vulnerable women. In court, the narrative painted was not of a misguided artist but of a calculated predator running a cold, systematic operation. What was once hype and flash had become something far more sinister. Cash Out allegedly leveraged his fame and online presence to draw young women in with false promises of fame, fortune, and career breakthroughs. Many of these women were simply chasing their dreams, hoping to make it in the music industry or just looking for a better life. He portrayed himself as someone who could help them rise, claiming he was cut from a different cloth than other artists in Atlanta. "I'm in that category who can rap," he once said confidently, but behind the spotlight, prosecutors said something far darker was unfolding. This was not some solo hustle gone sideways, it was allegedly a full-blown operation, with his own family members deeply involved. His mother, Linda Smith, who prosecutors dubbed Mama Cash Out, and his cousin Tyrone Taylor, were both accused of playing key roles in what the state described as a family-run trafficking ring. What made this case especially alarming was that it was not just about a rapper losing his way or getting caught up in fame. It was about what prosecutors described as a well-organized and deeply disturbing criminal enterprise, one that allegedly involved the help of his own family. Rather than acting alone, the artist known as Cash Out was accused of operating a methodical trafficking ring where even those closest to him, including his mother and cousin, were allegedly key players. This was not some chaotic hustle. The accusations suggested it was a calculated operation that relied on deception, manipulation, and psychological control. The women who were pulled into this alleged network were not random, they were reportedly chosen, groomed, and exploited through promises that touched on their dreams. Offers of record deals, access to the music industry, and financial security were dangled in front of them, only to be replaced by control and abuse once trust was gained. The illusion of opportunity masked what prosecutors claimed was a trap, designed to strip these women of their independence, dignity, and freedom. According to court documents and testimony, the places where this exploitation occurred were not some back alley setups. They were identified headquarters, a hotel near Fulton Industrial Boulevard, and a residence in Atlanta's Carroll Heights neighborhood. These were not just random, temporary stops. Prosecutors painted them as central locations used to isolate the victims, manage their movements, and carry out acts of coercion and abuse. The disturbing part was how much planning allegedly went into it. IDs were reportedly taken, contact with family and friends was cut off, and the women were trained not to trust or talk to law enforcement. It was a system designed to silence, control, and break them down emotionally. Even basic human needs, like food, were allegedly used as tools of control. Testimony revealed that women were only fed if they performed certain acts, turning nourishment into a reward for obedience. It was not just about exploitation, it was about power, domination, and greed, woven into a so-called family business. The operation allegedly had a financial system in place, too, where women were forced to deposit their earnings into kitchen drawers or send money digitally to Cash Out or his mother. This built an organized money pipeline that prosecutors say directly funded those exploiting the victims. And when law enforcement finally stepped in during April 2022, they came down hard. Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis hit Cash Out and 5 others, including his family members, with a 41-count indictment. The charges ranged from aggravated sodomy and human trafficking to RICO violations, firearms offenses, and more. The use of RICO laws, often reserved for organized crime syndicates, signaled just how serious and structured this alleged network was. This was not just a fall from grace, it was, according to prosecutors, a dark and intentional system built on the suffering of others. The methods of manipulation described in court were chilling. Prosecutors claimed women were cut off from their families, stripped of their identification, and trained not to speak to law enforcement. Their basic human needs like food were reportedly weaponized. According to testimony, some victims were only allowed to eat after performing acts, creating a horrifying cycle of control that left them completely dependent. The financial setup was no less disturbing. Instead of helping these women build a future, they were allegedly forced to deposit their earnings into kitchen drawers or transfer them, digitally, sending the money straight into the hands of Cash Out or his mother. What looked like a music label from the outside was, according to the state, Nothing more than a front for exploitation, and then came April 2022, the turning point. That was when District Attorney Fani Willis dropped a bombshell, a 41-count indictment charging Cash Out and 5 others, including his own family, with a litany of crimes. The charges included aggravated sodomy, human trafficking, RICO violations, pimping, pandering, firearm offenses, obstruction, and more. The use of RICO laws, originally crafted to take down mafia-style organizations, sent a strong message. This was no random sting, it was a full-scale takedown of what authorities claimed was a deeply rooted, systematic operation disguised as a hip-hop hustle. Authorities have recently begun shifting their focus toward hip-hop collectives and record labels, treating them as potential fronts for organized crime, and Cash Out found himself squarely in their crosshairs. When prosecutors slapped him with RICO charges, they essentially claimed his music business was not a legitimate enterprise but rather a cover for long-term criminal activity. Instead of folding, Cash Out immediately denied all allegations, pleading not guilty and posting spiritual affirmations on Instagram, insisting he would be vindicated. His refusal to take a plea deal made it clear he was prepared to battle the charges in court. By June 2023, the case intensified with new evidence and additional alleged victims, indicating investigators were steadily tightening the noose. What set this case apart from typical rapper run-ins with the law was the calculated nature of the accusations. It was not just about weapons or drugs. Prosecutors described a well-structured operation allegedly responsible for harming numerous women over time. The troubling part was how this underground activity allegedly coexisted with his visible rise in the music industry. While he dropped hits and collaborated with big-name artists, authorities claimed he was simultaneously masterminding a system designed to exploit vulnerable women. To grasp how a chart-topping rapper could end up here, one has to rewind and trace the journey of John Michael Hakeem Gibson, born August 15, 1990, in Atlanta. He came from hardship many inner-city youth know to well, generational poverty and limited opportunities that often make street life seem like the only way out. His first brush with the law came in 2009 with a gun charge in Clayton County, Georgia. Unlike many who fall into a cycle of arrests, Gibson beat that case, and it reportedly served as a wake-up call that nudged him toward music. With focus and hunger, he linked up with indie label Bases Loaded before securing a dream deal with Epic Records. Cash Out saw himself as more than a rapper. He saw himself as a hustler in the truest sense, versatile, ambitious, and always reaching for the next lane, whether it was film, fashion, or business. But the music world is as fickle as it is fast, and the pressure to follow up a hit is real. His next single, Big Booty, released in July 2012, didn't hit the same way. That's how the game works. Sometimes you ride the wave, and other times, it crashes. Still, Cash Out wasn't letting one setback write his story. In 2013, he teamed up with Future, Atlanta's reigning star at the time. A collaboration that reaffirmed his status in the city's rap elite. But it was the 2014 single, She Twerkin', that truly marked his return. It charted #100 on the Billboard Hot 100. But it was enough to show he could still get people moving and keep his name circulating. It also led the way for his debut album, a moment that Cash Out saw as his chance to level up nationally and internationally. During this era, it seemed like Cash Out had made it. He was living the dream. Platinum hits, respect in the game, a label of his own, and a loyal fan base. He wore success well, with humility and confidence. To outsiders, there was no scandal, no drama. Everything looked clean, polished, and focused. But what fans didn't see, and what prosecutors would later claim, is that beneath the surface of this polished public image was something deeply disturbing. The timing made it even more tragic. According to the state, the same year Cash Out was reaching the peak of his career, too was also the year his alleged criminal activity began. While his name was lighting up radio charts, his private life was allegedly becoming something far darker. In the public eye, Cash Out was holding plaques and talking business. Behind closed doors, authorities say he was building a criminal enterprise that weaponized the very tools that brought him success. At the center of it all was Piz Music Group LLC, the record label he founded. What was supposed to be a platform for launching artists allegedly became a tool for exploiting women. According to prosecutors, the label provided cover justification for frequent travel, meetings with young aspiring talents, and financial transactions that otherwise might raise red flags. His celebrity status wasn't just a career asset, it allegedly became bait. Women were promised opportunities, dreams of stardom, and access to the industry. Instead, prosecutors claimed they were pulled into a system of manipulation and control. The infrastructure of success money homes, social clout allegedly became the very foundation of something predatory. What makes this story hit even harder is that it reveals how easily influence and fame can be twisted. Cash Out's brand, once rooted in determination and survival, was now being redefined by a case that painted him as the architect of long-term harm. The use of RICO charges in this case wasn't just about bringing down one individual, it sent a broader message. These laws, once aimed at dismantling mafia families, are now being used to target rap crews and music labels. Prosecutors argue they're cracking down on criminal networks masquerading as music operations, but critics warn this could blur the line between artistic expression and criminal implication, casting suspicion on a culture that has historically been scrutinized through a biased lens. As for Cash Out, his story ends not in applause or encore, but with a life sentence and a legacy forever altered. The rise that once symbolized hope and transformation is now remembered for something far more chilling. For the hip-hop community, it's a sobering reminder of how the same stages that elevate can also mask, and how success, if misused, can become a tool for devastation. That's the weight of this case. Not just a fall from grace, but a reckoning with the hidden realities that fame can sometimes conceal.